Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Niagara Falls
experience. Eh?
Woohoo! Yes.
Ooh.
As always, I am Nico the American, being joined by Peter the Canadian.
Hey, that's me. All Canada hail. There. I hope it doesn't hail. Yeah, we've had some really weird this year, isn't it? Weather-wise, the river versus last year.
Yeah, so this episode 19, if you're watching this in rerun, is actually labeled the Thaw. And in the comment section, you'll see we kind of noted there's a suspicious lack of ice this year.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about this for pretty much most of the last month or so. That there's no ice on Lake Erie. The Hornblower Niagara City Cruises is already running in Canada. It appears that the Maid of the Mist boat ride is expecting to be launching. They never release official dates until they're ready to go in. There is a lot of word on the street things that I know tour guides hear. I don't know what the tour guide's hearing.
I looked over yesterday from the observation deck, and that's where I could see the dock of the Maid of the Mist. And the cranes were maneuvering one of the boats out. I can only assume it got in the water. I wasn't over there today, but yeah, you hear lots of rumor and conjecture and things like that. But generally, they're still aiming for April 7th, I believe.
All right, so the unofficial date for the American side is expected to kind of be April 7th. I do believe the Canadian boats right now are running, but only on weekends, it looks like.
Yeah, they were out this weekend, and they had pretty good numbers on a lot of their departures. And it was so funny because it started everyone on the American side asking, like, how do we do that? What do we do? When's our boat going in the water? But and it's not anyone's fault, etc. It's just that Hornblower, or we call them Hornblower, the Niagara Scenic Cruises or City Cruises, they got an early start, and that's great to see. And I think that Julian's going to show us a picture of the Hornblower from this last week.
Okay, so let's cut to the Hornblower real quick. So this is the Hornblower right now this last week. As you can see, other than a little bit of snow on the side, there's not a lot of ice in the water. Now, if we compare that to last April 1st of 2022, that was the exact same river, and you can see there's the Skylon Tower.
Yeah.
In April 1st of last year. That is the ice flow we usually deal with, and hence why the boat usually comes at the end of the month, sometimes at the beginning of May. This year, we're not dealing with any of this. There has been no massive ice flow. Lake Erie, it never was covered with ice, which is an unusual phenomenon, especially,
yeah.
I mean, any time in history, Lake Erie usually is covered at least in a solid portion of ice, hence why the ice boom exists too. And for those of you that need a fun fact, the ice boom is this very large boom, like of pontoons, that is dragged across Lake Erie, the upper Niagara River, actually. And its goal is to keep as much of the ice as possible in Lake Erie and out of the upper Niagara River. Otherwise, that ice will jam up the water intakes for the power plants, both on the Canadian and American side, and would cause serious damage to the hydropower facility. So they started installing this, basically a big series of chained pontoons. In fact, there's one of them, one of the big boom parts, is directly in front of the state park on Old Falls Street.
Yes.
And it's painted, says "Welcome to Niagara Falls, USA" on it, and it's really this big, giant piece of steel. And you can just imagine these are going right across, at the mouth of, I do believe they put it like right at the edge of where the lake meets the river.
Well, yeah, it's in a kind of a semicircle around, up from the river's mouth. It's like a semicircle around. They use GPS to locate the anchors for it and connect them in. And the Coast Guard does that every year in the fall. They put out the ice boom, and of course, as you said, they take it in. This year, they took it in weeks ago, and there was just no purpose to have it.
And that's it. I mean, it just was never... our audio has been knocked out.
Has it?
Yes. And
all right.
Nope.
No, it's showing that it's still registering. Julian, can you hit reset on the audio there? Showing that it's still registering.
Oh, yeah, no, we are back on.
Okay.
The caption's knocked out, so I've been using the captions to auto-generate, and I saw a blip on the thing. So
Sorry
guys.
about
Yeah,
that.
our audio is right. We've been having audio issues, and we're trying to figure out where the gremlin is in the system. So I've been keeping it live on Facebook and watching auto captioning to determine whether or not we have audio or not.
Oh, that's cool.
Good evening to Sherry, who's watching us this evening and said good evening. Good evening. Good evening, all our other viewers, everyone who's watching our show.
Yes.
And if you're watching on rerun, good 11:42 a.m. on a Thursday.
Hey, there you go. We got some, we've got some pretty good shows coming up that we're already working towards. Next Wednesday, we will be at the Herschel Carousel Museum. We'll be joined, if you remember last week, Nico raised the story of one of the tour guides, Angela, who is known for antics and cute creatures she carries with her and her dinosaur. And Angela will be joining us at the Herschel as a guest host. And we'll be at the Carousel Museum for our show with Ian Sapala, their executive director. And we'll show you the ins and outs of the Carousel Museum in North Tonawanda.
Yes. And so I'm really excited. We've been working on this for quite a few weeks, trying to get this to happen, go to fruition. And this is really exciting because the Herschel Carousel Museum is something that not everybody knows about. I'd say a lot of tourists aren't aware of it, which is weird because if you've ever heard of EXP Niagara, EXP Niagara is training the destination Niagara does for all of us people in the service industry here in Niagara Falls. And the Herschel's featured on EXP Niagara. It's one of the things they're actually really proud to talk about, the fact that the Herschel carousels were made right here in Niagara County in North Tonawanda, and they're these hand-carved wooden carousels, and they're stunningly beautiful, and they were kind of the inventors of Kittyland and a whole bunch of other things. But we're going to be covering that next week. And also next week joining us is going to be that tour guide that we talked about last week, which is Angela. She's the one that has a giant T-Rex head on a stick. His name is Farini, and I'm sure she'll explain why it's named Farini. But she's just so much fun, and this was kind of a treat because all of a sudden St. Patrick's Day, he texts me, he's like, hey, do you want Angela on? And I texted back in all caps, drag her there. If she changes her mind, I don't care. Just make sure she's there.
I sent her a clip of that.
I know, I'm sure you did.
That was fun. Yeah, I was so excited when she agreed. The week after, we have two tour guides from one of the local companies. They are Marty and Nick. Nick is a fellow Canadian. Marty is off the wall. And together, they will tell us about is it the annual migration or whatever? But they talk about is it the beaver shark?
The beaver shark.
Yes.
So we're going to have...
They are a riot. Oh, man.
They are an interesting bunch. That episode might be a few days late for April 1st, but... We're still going to be celebrating it. We're going to be having a very serious deep dive discussion about the beaver shark infestation in the Niagara River.
Indeed, the Quebecois, they're so upset with the beaver shark. But no, that'll be a lot of fun. And we're going to introduce a roundtable of tour guides from all types of companies as well, and talk about being tour guides in Niagara Falls, whether you've been considering applying with one of the companies that's hiring, or whether you have questions about what it takes or what life is like as a tour guide. I mean, I do it every day, but it's a lot of fun. There's a really good crew of people out there. And kind of crazy.
For a madman.
Yeah, and what's really kind of cool about all of the different, there's a lot of different tour companies, a lot of different tour guides. There's different styles of tours in Niagara Falls. But what you end up getting is you get a lot of people that will ask the question, do I need a tour guide to visit Niagara Falls? Do I need to be part of a tour? What are the pros of being part of the tour? What are any cons maybe of being part of a tour? Which usually is just time constraints. Usually that's kind of the main one is depending upon what time you have. Some of the longer tours might not be in your favor. But what's really, tours are fun because they are something that have been around as long as Niagara Falls has been a tourist destination. There have been tour guides. We were talking a few weeks back about Bossy Sims the cow, and the reason why Bossy Sims was no longer allowed to walk into the river was entirely because the tour guides in the Niagara Falls were like, nope, this is ruining my tour. And that is what I find so funny is even in the 1800s, tour guides were like, this cow is making a laughing stock of how I'm talking about how powerful the water is, and this cow's standing out there. You're ruining my tour. And I love that, because it's like, you still have the same, like, these are the same kind of weird, quirky things that would happen on a tour to, like, maybe not a cow.
Right.
But you say, like, some strange things have happened, even in recent years in Niagara Falls. I was just, in fact, we were just rewatching some of the Daredevils, and we were, today I was rewatching it was 5 years ago, 5 years ago in June, that Erendira Walenda hung from the helicopter over the falls by her teeth. Because it was, actually it's going to be 6 years in June. My apologies, it was already 5 years, because it was 5 years after Nick Walenda walked, and Nick Walenda's going to be 11 years this year. And hopefully by then they're going to have, they're working on a lovely little dedicated monument to him on Old Fall Street. That is going to be up. There's actually some interesting news on Old Fall Street. I don't know if you've been reading the Gazette this morning.
No, do tell.
So some of the development, there's like interesting development going on.
Oh yes, I did catch
Old
that.
Falls
Yeah.
and First, with some like apartment complexes that are being built and stuff. Those are things, I think those would be more to be discussed in like some of our news shows, if we have any. I don't. Our show that probably would have covered this, I think, is on hiatus at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's always interesting when you look at Niagara Falls, especially if you follow the business reports of what development is coming into the city. And you can kind of question, like, and you study, like, why is this going here? Where's going where? And you kind of, these are properties, these were known as the Smoke and Joe properties. They were owned by Smoke and Joe, as he's
Smoke
known.
and Joe Anderson. Yep.
And Smoke and Joe, and he owned like Smoke and Joe. If you're around here, out on the Tuscarora Reservation, Smoke and Joe's. And he owned a lot of properties downtown as well that he had purchased in about the mid 2000s. For a while, he owned the Winter Garden before it was demolished. But the state bought them back and has now put them out on RFPs, request for proposals, and has been slowly kind of segmenting it off to redevelop more sections of downtown, which is kind of cool. There's also a big event center coming onto 3rd Street that everyone is very, very excited about. And I'm excited because half of that building is the original Niagara Hudson building. Not to be confused with the Niagara Hudson building that is out in, I believe, Syracuse. That's a skyscraper. And that thing is an Art Deco masterpiece. It's also known as now it's the Niagara Mohawk building, but Niagara Hudson was Niagara Mohawk. Going back as Niagara Falls Power Company, Niagara Hudson, Niagara Mohawk. National Grid. It's all one continuous. These are the weird facts that you're going to learn on this podcast.
Amen.
We start by talking about, wow, there's no ice on the river, and we end with, did you know the National Grid goes all the way back to Niagara Falls Power Company? And there was a train station on
All right, so sorry about that. I think we're finding out that the sound effects knock out the audio connection. I don't know why. But this is Skirting Justice. Now, when I do tours, I've been working for a number of organizations over the years. I've worked for or with Road Scholar and various tour companies around North America and Europe. And part of it is that if you take a tour of Niagara Falls in March, you may get a tour guide who finds a way to link something to International Women's Month. Whereas there's, as Niagara Falls itself, it has several women who were firsts. Maria Spelterina, she was the tightrope walker who in 1876 kind of outdid all the other tightrope walkers with multiple walks across the gorge. Backwards, blindfolded, manacled. I mean, she with peach baskets on her feet. So there are great stories of women's achievement. The first person over the falls in a barrel was a woman, and you can tie that in. But it's there are times when we do tour subjects, tour focuses, like Skirting Justice. Now that's an original that I copyrighted about 10 years ago. As the byline says, a rare connection with history through personal experience in places of significance while engaging with the people who changed the world. Now, you engage with the people who changed the world, even though they're no longer with us, through the messages they left, the actions they did, the places they were, and what happened there. So we'll pick that up again, Julian, if we can start it up. But Skirting Justice is a tour. It's a product that you buy for an overnight, and it goes between Buffalo and Johnstown, New York, which was the birthplace of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. It is clearly marked out at the Women's Rights National Historic Site. It's a museum in Seneca Falls, New York. You can see the meeting of Elizabeth Cady Stanton with Susan B. Anthony. There she is. And we travel there to the site of the meeting. And then we move onwards by visit all of the different locations in that area, Seneca Falls. That's where the first gathering was. There's Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I want to pause it there for a moment, Julian, thank you. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, there's an interesting story. Her brother passed away, and she came to her father and said, "Father, I won't let you down. I'll be with you forever." And he knew that she was a very accomplished young woman, and all he said to her was, "If you'd only been born a boy." She learned the language of Greek. He gave her the same answer. She'd achieved something really difficult, and if you'd only been born a boy. She got her degree, and her father said, "If you'd only been born a boy." Being a woman in the mid-1800s was not an easy task in terms of having career goals. So we'll pick that up again. But Elizabeth Cady Stanton was one of the spearheads, and I take groups of women like you see, and we visit a number of places like the Visitor Center at the National Historic Park. Great information on the suffrage movement. Or here you see the meeting hall, which was, I believe, a church. But you look at this group of statues, the second from the left was Frederick Douglass, who was also involved in the suffrage movement. And so there's Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton together. And part of the story is that it led to generations of protest. As you can see, these photos are readily available on the internet, but they show that women stood up and fought for rights that were not given to them naturally. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton is one of the major players in that. That's from her home in Johnstown, New York. And so there's the women who were most involved in the first movement of women's rights, and back in Seneca Falls. Here's one from the United Kingdom as well. United Kingdom, Australia, all the nations were gathered together in trying to bring about votes for women and rights for women. Women couldn't even speak in their own defense in court in a lot of cases. So this is a tour product. Here we are at Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester, New York, where Susan B. Anthony is buried. There's a lineup of people who came to visit when the when people voted for Hillary Clinton, feeling that was the first ever presidential candidate that they ever had a chance to vote for. Pause right there, Julian, thank you. They put their voting stickers on the grave site, on the grave itself, on the stone. And it really lent a lot of power, emotional power, to the fact that women were so proud that they, finally had a candidate, a female candidate to vote for. And I know I've been kind of dominating this, but have you had any experiences with anything like this?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my first, not this past year. I know we talked about that I had gone for a couple of days out to the Finger Lakes. I was not able to go to Niagara Falls this year because the snowstorm hit and I had to make my way back here. But I was planning to kind of possibly do a day back there. My first time going to the Finger Lakes, which was 2021, we did, in fact, go to Niagara Falls. The Women's History Museum was under refurbishment at the time. It was still, we were kind of on the edge of the pandemic there. I did get to walk around, we crossed over the bridge and everything, and there's a lot. And Niagara Falls is just a beautiful town in general, but you could see that the town is really proud of its, suffrage movement heritage. It is very proud of that. And it was just really cool being there. And, I was able to take my girlfriend Vanessa there and be and she thought it was amazing. And it was just a really exciting thing because it's part of history. It really is. And it's not that far away from here. It's a little over, I'd say 2.5 hours away, a little, about 2.5 hours away, depending upon how quickly you drive, I guess. I mean, it could be minutes away if you're a really fast driver. Depends on the speed of your car, I guess. I'm following. I'm a law-abiding citizen. It took 2.5. It took 2.5.
That's good.
But I think it did. I don't know. I stopped in Penyan first, so I lose track of mileage. It was all one tank. It was a one-tank getaway. That's what we.
Oh, that was great.
But it's really, these are, and you learn so much about the stories. The other thing that I've done several times is I've been out to Sonnenberg Gardens in Canandaigua. And Sonnenberg Gardens it's part of the state park system. It is a giant, massive mansion and floral display and rose gardens and all this. But Mary Sonnenberg, who ended up basically owning this property until she died. And then she ended up, I think she donated it, and it changed hands quite a few times, fell into disrepair briefly, and then the state took it and restored it. I happened to go there in 2019, and they had a full setup display because it was approaching the 100-year anniversary of women's right to vote in the state of New York. And that was really cool because I happened to be, and also it was half price to enter because there was a car show going on outside, and they're like, gee, why is it? And you realize because a car show and rock and roll music playing right next to this Victorian mansion was kind of a weird disconnect. It was still a lot of fun, but it was a great day to be there. I had just gone from the Grape Festival out in Naples. Right. Which we might have to do one day too, because that's really fun. But it was just great going into this big giant mansion and doing wine tastings and then spending 2 hours reading about the history of the suffrage movement within New York State, which was just amazing. And since Niagara Falls itself is, I would say, famous, it's not as famous as it should be, but Niagara Falls in and of itself has been the location of so many different civil rights movements over the course of history. New York in general has, mainly because New York is a hub of culture and population. Between, you have New York City, you have the Erie Canal, you have Niagara Falls with its hydropower, you have, Buffalo as a head of commerce, you have all of these areas kind of working together, that it was only natural that somewhere like New York would be the place where all of, where it happens. They kind of even talk about it in Hamilton, the revolution's happening in New York. That's, New York State is really kind of cool. And I know people kind of, either they focus on New York City and they ignore the rest of the state, or they focus on their little section. But some of what we talk about on the show and why Peter's talking about this specific, tour that he does here is because we want to highlight things, not only here in Niagara, we do want to highlight things that if you're in Niagara, you can also see these things and you can learn history about this, because it's all interconnected and it's all really close to each other. As big as New York State is, it's still pretty, in the grand scheme of things, you could drive in a day, you can get to any section of the state. So they're great day trips, and they're great. If you're into this history, go to Seneca Falls, go to Canandaigua, go to Sonnenberg Gardens, because you can, go learn about Mary Sonnenberg. Go try Mary Sonnenberg red wine. It's really good. It's a house red blend. I did buy 4 bottles of that on the way back. But it's really, go explore these things, because there's so many of these stories. You're right down to Annie Edson Taylor here in the Falls. The first person to go over the falls in a barrel and live was a woman. It was Annie Edson Taylor. And she was a retired school teacher. And it wasn't not just a woman, it was a 63-year-old woman. She did it on her 63rd birthday. Like, that is, and at the same time, you had all these like big macho men, and they would be like, oh, I'm a daredevil, and would fail. They wouldn't succeed. Like, it ended badly for them. And then this 63-year-old retired school teacher and her cat showed all of them. And that's like, we were talking a few weeks ago, we were at Daredevil Records, and they have the mural of, a modern interpretation of Annie Edson Taylor as this like punk rock, awesome, feminist. And I love this, because this really is what made our community, not only here in Niagara Falls, but in New York. And these are great stories.
Right. Well, it's just it, is that we can resume that, Julian, thank you. When we have tour products, as we call them, we try and take a full experience. This one has an overnight, and then we go down to Johnstown. But we bring back Niagara Falls because Belva Lockwood, who you see here, was the very first woman to legitimately run for president. A woman tried earlier than Belva did, but back in the 1870s or 60s, but she was too young to be eligible. But Belva Lockwood was from this area, the Lockport area, I believe, and she was the first woman to run for president, and they put out an arrest warrant for her. She had to flee to Ohio. Other women in this area that are significant: Louise Bethune, first woman architect. She designed Lafayette Hotel that you can see here, and numerous other properties from Buffalo, New York. All of this because the women had to stand up for what they were, for their rights. They were not God-given the way they were for men. And so what we try and do is we try and take these subjects, try and incorporate your sense of place in them, and create for you, the guest, an experience where you travel through and you see the sights, and you kind of get a real feel for distance and the challenges that were, in that day, they didn't have texting. You didn't get the word out in 2 seconds. So thanks, Julian. Always great having Julian here. He's our producer, hidden away in the back room. And so that's an example for Women's Month of some of the things we've done. When I say we, that would be myself and some colleagues, where we design things. I've portrayed P.T. Barnum. I've done Underground Railroad tours in Canada, down in the places where those who had fled slavery settled, and which includes Dresden, Ontario, where they have the original Uncle Tom's Cabin. So whatever the month or occasion is, we can find products or experiences, better than products, to help you really dive into it. And this is Women's Month. There's so much to celebrate. We got Rosie.
We do.
Thank you,
Back
Rosie,
by
for
popular
coming back.
demand.
Yeah. And she's punching. She's throwing in the punches, I'll tell you. But it's great to have Rosie back. Thank you for bringing her. Thank you, Rosie. You're getting really good with her there. But yeah, we look for things like that. If you know of a company or a group that is doing something special for an occasion, by all means, let us know. We want to explore it. We want to learn about it and share it with others, because people want these experiences. When you come to Niagara Falls and you learn that the first person who ran for president, as a first woman to run, was from the area, that opens doors for conversation.
And that's it. These are the stories of our lives. Mm-hmm. These are the people that laid the groundwork for the rights and privileges we have today. I look in, the history of, the women's movement is very close to me. The history of the immigrant movement is important to me. There's a lot of things that I think we all just kind of take for granted nowadays.
Yep.
And it's like you watch these things and you're like, okay, like pay attention, because there's like big history that has happened right here on these, footsteps. And Niagara Falls is the prime example. We're like, oh, it's, it's a tourist destination. There's a little waterfall here. And then you turn, you're like, do you know that where you're standing right now? Like, and you're like, oh, no, you're standing, see this edge right here? You're standing near the rapids? Yeah, this was the Cataract House. This was the last stop on the Underground Railroad. Like, and you're like, what? Yeah, it was like this. And you're like, it was like, yes, freedom seekers on their last, trying to head over Canada would be here. There was an entire underground tunnel system in that area. They would hide them. They'd get them either down, try to get them a boat across the river, or get across the suspension bridge. And it was, head to the Underground Railroad Heritage Center. They tell this much better than I do.
And that is worth a visit year-round.
Much. And they hold special events, and they do so many great things there. It's right in the Niagara Falls train station on Main Street and Depot Ave. So head there. Like, it's open pretty much, I think, every day except for certain major holidays. But they're amazing. They're just really great.
Absolutely. The other things that are happening in and around the state park this week, I mean, we talked about Hornblower. They've been digging like crazy around Goat Island, putting in new Wi-Fi at the state park.
Oh, it seems, that's it? They weren't trying to find lost gold?
No, but they do have, I may have mentioned last week, they do have an archaeologist with them whose role is to oversee anywhere they're digging to ensure they're not disturbing native burial grounds or other areas of significance. So I think that shows the mandate of the state park, that they're always protecting what they're charged with.
Yes, that is true. They do pay a lot of attention. A shovel doesn't really go in the ground in the state park unless at least, every department known to man has made sure that it's not going to violate the very important, you have to realize, this goes all the way back to our very first episode, Peter, when we were talking about the formation of Niagara Falls State Park and Frederick Law Olmsted and the ruling guidelines of how the falls was going to be restored as a reservation and not be a factory mill. So this goes all the way back to, here it is, that was in 1885. Yes. We are in 2023 and we are still following the same rules, more or less. Some things have changed, some things have been tweaked a little bit. I don't think Olmsted knew about Wi-Fi. I don't think Tesla had told him about Wi-Fi. I think that's what Tesla knew about Wi-Fi. Tesla absolutely knew about Wi-Fi. But
we'll have to do an episode sometime on the crazy questions we get or suppositions people have.
Where you rent the barrels.
Yeah, exactly. We actually, when we did the Characters of History at the Falls, starting in 2010, I portrayed Augustus Porter, but we had Annie Taylor, we had excellent portrayal by a local pastor at First Baptist Church, Kathleen Ordaway. But one of the things was we thought, let's build a barrel to where she could do pictures. And there was no way we could bring a barrel out there because someone would throw it in the water.
Yeah.
Like they figured that. So, but there's just so much to the whole history there that comes alive when you meet someone representing that character. We will have to show the Tiny Tesla videos at some point. They're great. By the way, Cave of the Winds, the deck assembly has started. They're pulling the wood in. It's an awesome team. I want to give a shout out to Lewis and to Griff and Caleb. By the way, Caleb was the firefighter who works for the state park who went to attend the two people who had fallen a month or so ago, and received an award from the state parks for his heroism because the boy did survive. But also, in addition to Caleb, I just want to say hi to Carlos and Mark and Luke, and just a great crew down there who have started putting the wood together so that they can assemble the extended deck for Cave of the Winds.
And that's how you know that summer is coming. When the hurricane deck is done, it's summer. That's it. It's not even spring. You go straight to summer there. It's like fireworks. Fireworks has been going on. Are they still going on weekends? I hear them.
No, I've heard them too, and I don't know why they were on the other day. I forget. Because where I live is right at the state park, so I can hear them when they go off. And I don't know. I missed that one, but they'll be back as a Memorial Day weekend, and then they run it every day until Columbus Day,
which is fantastic. That is, people ask for that. Like the one thing that people are always like, when's the fireworks? And then during the pandemic, we didn't have fireworks. And then last year, they made up for it for having fireworks every possible night until the end of time, which was great for tourists, but not great if you live downtown because it gets a little loud.
Man,
it's like
that's
every single night. Between that, my favorite would be like that, and then the casino would be shooting theirs off, and you'd be like, okay. Yep. I always tell people there's fireworks somewhere. Don't worry. Someone's gonna have it. Even if you have to drive down some random street, someone's gonna have fireworks. And as we do live in a city, you know, it's like someone's still gonna have some.
You mentioned something about the visitor center, the new visitor center.
Yes.
You've been watching that rather intently.
I've been watching the visitor center, and I was just there, and they've started putting, so we had talked about earlier, you know, the glass work's all done on it. They are working on the interior. They have put the exterior stone facade work on both the visitor center and the building adjacent to the main visitor center has been completed with the section of stone facade that goes on those portions, which means they are that much closer to being done. Word on the street is they are aiming for it being a grand opening for Memorial Day weekend. What everyone is hoping is that it will be a soft opening way before Memorial Day weekend, because you definitely don't want your first weekend to be Memorial Day. I mean, that would be a great trial for this new building, but let's soft open it as early as we can, because people are very excited for this new visitor center.
Yeah. Well, and they will be when they see it, because, I mean, God bless the staff who used to work in the Orrin Lehman one, but it was really poorly designed for traffic flow, and it was hard to maneuver through it. You had to get down below to get out to Maid of the Mist. So I think it's going to be just a tremendous change to the energy of that area. It's going to be wonderful.
And that's it. And also, like, in order to work around the visitor center, they were breaking infrastructure around it. Like, they were building cheatways around it. If you look at all the landscaping before they tore it down, like, okay, we're going to build ramps all the way around this way and build some stairs in this way, because the building had been there and it wasn't that old of a building. It was built in the 80s, I think. It wasn't, I think it was the 80s. I want to say, because
sure.
I know that the plaque on it had Mayor Michael O'Loughlin's name on it, so that would be the 70s and 80s.
Right.
So it wasn't. People thought that they'd be like, oh yeah, the building was put in the 60s. I'm like, I don't think it was that old, because the original one, the original State Park Visitor Center building is still there. That they kept. They did tear down the Orrin Lehman Visitor Center with all its glory. I do actually have 3D video of it right before they tore it down. So like a couple weeks before they shut it down, I happen to have a 3D camera. Don't ask me why I have a 3D camera. I do. And
I won't ask.
Madman. You're a madman.
Exactly. Yep. And I recorded the entire thing in 3D. Of course, no one has 3D televisions anymore. So I had to convert it into red, blue anaglyph, like it's 1950 monster movie. But I do have video, and one of these days I might release it as an extra on our channel for those of you that still have red, blue glasses. I have to find it. It's on an SD card somewhere. It was a couple of years ago, but yeah, it's so if you ever want to see the old visitor center in sparkling 3D. I do have it. Only me.
I see one of those trailers for a 1950s horror film, and all the audience with the glasses on.
It's like it was funny because when I'm doing it, they were definitely about to click, because there's boxes everywhere and like paper strewn about. I'm like, oh, we're out the door, aren't we? It's like, because they kept going, when are you closing? And they're like, oh, any day now. And then like they were ready for any day now for like 5 weeks, and they just, because they kept it open a little bit longer, mainly because people were still coming. So it was crazy. And John made a very important point that I do have to mention, that Michael O'Loughlin was mayor for 4 terms, which is true. Yes, Mayor Michael O'Loughlin was the longest serving mayor of Niagara Falls. He was mayor from January 1st of 1976 to January 1st of, let me see, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1. So 92? 92 or 93. I never get that. I can never remember his exit date. But yes, he was the longest serving mayor Michael O'Loughlin. So saying Michael O'Loughlin's name's on the plaque means the building could have built any time between like 76 and the early 90s.
It's all in Roman numerals.
It's like, you know, narrowing it down to O'Loughlin is like the worst part. If you narrow it down to Palillo or Gallia or Elia or Anello, that's easy. You got 4 years. You know, it's like those ones were. But O'Loughlin was mayor for so long. He changed the rules of being mayor. Did you know this?
No.
So the government used to be a strong city manager type government. The mayor was part of the city council, and the city council would appoint a city manager, and the city manager ran the city. And in the 80s, there was a series of very intense disputes over who's going to be city manager. The city tried to get rid of the city manager. The city manager went, "You can't get rid of me." The city put in a new city manager. The courts took out the old city manager and took the new one, got rid of him, put the old one back in, and it was like a revolving door of city manager. It was like, who's city manager this week? I don't know, ask the state. And eventually Michael O'Loughlin, I think by the time he won his third term, was so fed up with that he changed the city's charter and said, the mayor is now in charge. And said, there is no city manager. There's going to be a city administrator that works for the mayor, and the mayor's in charge here. Which is why you see sometimes in like Niagara Falls city government that like the mayor used to have a seat on the city council but doesn't anymore, but sometimes the mayor will go to the city council meeting and might sit on the panel and might not. It's some of that has to do with like, you always look like, there's one too many seats on this bench. You're like, yeah, that goes all the way back to when O'Loughlin decided, I'm done. I'm in charge here now. And what was weird was O'Loughlin was such a kind of he was a good mayor. Like historically, if looking back at the things that Michael O'Loughlin did, the reason he was elected 4 terms, the most of any mayor in Niagara Falls, was he was one of our best mayors. So when he decided to change the charter and restructure the government, people agreed. They were like, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's stop the infighting here and kind of put someone who's elected in charge of the government, not someone who's appointed. And then, you know, the people changed their minds back and forth and things have kind of wobbled since then. But you can thank the reason why you are electing the person in charge of city government here in Niagara Falls, you can thank Michael O'Loughlin. That was him.
And I will. In heaven. No, I think he's passed.
He did. He passed away in 1996.
Well, as we're winding down, I will be getting back over to the homeland and starting to report from Canada more with what's going on.
We don't even know if Canada's still there.
No, they are. They are. And they're alive and well. And
I've seen them come here. Yeah. They've been here a lot.
They're looking for me, but no. But we're definitely going to have great updates this year from Canada. We're going to be presenting on a number of things that probably you don't know about on the Canadian side that really are worth visiting. And Kevin Hutchison and our Zach Attack and his wife Crystal are our team for Fort Niagara this year, covering all the events at Fort Niagara in high definition. And we've got next week at the Carousel Museum. So looking forward to getting out into the community, meeting more people who have relevance in our tourism industry, and generally celebrating everything good.
And that's it. This is what the show's all about. We're really about showing all the great things there are here in Niagara Falls and sharing your Niagara Falls experience. It's almost like that's our name. But what is, and these are like, we have some really fun shows coming along, being able to go to North Town. Way back?
Yep,
Do we exist? There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. See, what happened was our dear tech producer, Julian, decided to play a Forrest Gump quote, and it knocked the entire system out. Which is as Forrest Gump as something can get.
That's what we're going to call him. We're going to call him Forrest. Run, Forrest, run, because we're coming to get you.
Oh, no.
All right.
But yeah, these are the exciting moments. But the only reason we can do things like this are because of people like you. You wonderful viewers are just so amazing. And I want to give a shout out to George, who told us thank you. We try to do a good show. The fact that you're telling us we do a good show is great, because sometimes we feel like, what are we doing? But apparently, yes, we're on the street. We have I've known George for years now.
Is that George McCoy?
Uh-huh.
Hey, how you, Georgie?
He's wonderful. And shout out to Mary, and shout out to Kevin, and shout out to John, and shout out to all of our viewers and all of you that are watching on reruns, and all of you that are, if you find us on YouTube. Not a lot of people watch us on YouTube. It's the same stream that's on Facebook. But let's say you have a friend that doesn't have a Facebook account. We are on YouTube as well. It's youtube.com, I believe, / Your Niagara Falls Experience. If you just go Your Niagara Falls Experience on YouTube, we do pop up. And most of our episodes, not the early ones, because we didn't have YouTube at the time, but all of our current ones should be on YouTube in their full glory. So you share them. If you find something interesting, leave a comment. It doesn't matter if this show was from 3 weeks ago. If you leave a comment, we do read them. We do see them. We'll respond. We might even respond on an upcoming show. I've had people send a message from like a week and a half ago, and I've been like, oh, that's a point we're going to talk about on the show here. Like, wait a second. But that's it. The reason we do this is for viewers like you. Thank you.
Indeed, though, we do thank you. All right, so we done?
Is that it? Is our way over?
Are we good? Should we grab Rosie and get ready for a little dance-off at the end?
I suppose it's time.
All right, but we're waiting for Julian to bring up the final video for us. And
we have one of those?
Yeah, it's even in there. Hang on, it'll show. See, closing?
Oh, yeah, look at
closing time.
We're closed. Goodbye.
What's he doing?
He's trying to figure out what a blank is blank.
Oh, yes, I remember.
He knows what he's doing. He's a cool kid.
Yes, he is very helpful.
Is he?
Yeah, that one. See, we're guiding Julian now, or at least
we're guiding the but who guides the guides?
You're right.
We don't. You're good at guiding. You're a guide, so that makes sense that you're good at guiding.
Good guiding versus bad guiding.
How do you guide a guide?
Bad guiding 101. To your left. No.
To your left, there's a...
I don't know. Behold, the tomb of the infant Jesus. There we go. Yeah.
This is what we call phoning it in at the last minute, because what do we call buying time? I think it's buying time.
Something like that. All right, let's take her away, Julian.